Well, for more on this story, we are joined by SABC News reporter Mbalenhle Mthethwa. Mbalenhle, a very good evening to you. Look, talk to us about this fire. What actually caused the fire to ensue this morning?
Well, certainly what we have established from emergency services spokesperson is that the fire was allegedly started by what seemed to have been a squabble between lovers in the early hours of Sunday morning. And from we also got an eyewitness account who explained to us that at around 4:30 this morning, a woman came knocking at her boyfriend's house or husband's house. It is unclear. And the husband refused to let her in. And when he did, she came back with a bottle of paraffin and doused the shack that the unit and the shack that this gentleman was staying in, and started the fire and set it alight. So that's what we understand has happened, and someone has been arrested and a case of arson has been opened.
All right. We understand, Mbalenhle, that unfortunately 2 people have lost their lives. I mean, is it another one of those buildings that is known as, what we call hijacked buildings? What is the situation of that building?
Well, certainly. We spoke to a ward councillor. Now, you have to understand that this building, this fire is one of several fires in the inner city, where we've seen the Bank of Lisbon as early as 2018 also catching fire and going down in flames. And more recently, we saw the Usindiso building, where we know that there's actually a commission of inquiry that has been established to investigate the cause and the prevalence of hijacked buildings that is actually continuing right now. On Friday, the commission was sat, and it will continue tomorrow. So this is happening with that also alongside this commission happening. But just to go back to the question that you asked, indeed, this was one of those illegally occupied buildings, and there seems to be another legal battle. It was not owned by the city of Johannesburg or the provincial government. However, it seems as though, based on the information we received from the ward councillor, the building is privately owned. However, there is a case before the courts just contesting the ownership of that building, given the fact that the person who claims to own that building does not have the documents to confirm or to verify his or her ownership of the particular building.
Now, Mbalenhle, we understand that the firefighters were able to put out the blaze early this morning, but talk to us about the structural damage and what happened to the rest of the residents. Have they been moved to temporary shelters, or what's happening in that regard?
Certainly. Well, with regards to the fire, we do understand that the structural integrity of the building has been compromised. When you look at the visuals, you'll see that the windows have been shattered, and the fire went all the way up and through the top floor of the 2-story building. Now, part of this, and this is what we've also heard during that commission of inquiry, the public hearings into the Usindiso Fire Commission of Inquiry, is that what fueled the fire are the shacks on the first floor. So these buildings are partitioned using shacks, using plywood, which is very highly flammable, and it's very easy to catch fire and to fuel the fire. And this is why we've seen fires actually not starting in one place and engulfing the entire building. Yes, of course, and engulfing the flames, engulfing the whole building because of the highly flammable and hazardous materials that are inside of these buildings. So these buildings, to a certain extent, are a hazard waiting to happen, or a disaster waiting to happen.
Any comment from or reaction from the city of Johannesburg at this stage?
Well, certainly. The Johannesburg Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda was present at the scene where 2 people died, and he has said that his office is going to work around the clock and is adamant to try and win the war, and they believe that they are turning the corner with regards to winning the war against illegally occupied buildings, better known as hijacked buildings, or popularly known as hijacked buildings. So that's what they're doing. But they're also going to be working with the provincial and national governments to try and find alternative temporary accommodation for the 150 plus people who have since been displaced from who were staying in that building.
And then, Mbalenhle, I mean, we know with the other fire that claimed almost 80 lives, the residents that were moved to a temporary shelter were actually complaining about the state of the shelter. Any word on where this temporary shelter will be for the fire that occurred this morning at Commissioner?
No, nothing yet. We are not aware of any fact and where these people are going to be moved to. But we have spoken to some of the victims, and they have pleaded with government to provide them with a dignified temporary accommodation, saying that they do not like being crammed in community halls, given that this means that they don't have their privacy. They want to be able to be with their families, many of whom walked out with the clothes on their back, and obviously will need to start all over again. And in terms of school uniform, children who stayed there will also need school uniform and so on. So I think the plea from these people is for government to take all of this into account. The fact that documents were lost in the fire, as well as the fact that they just want to stay in dignified areas and they don't want to be separated with their loved ones. Because what you saw with the Usindiso building victims, they went to homes or shelters,
yes,
and they were all separated, where the male was separated from the women and children. The women and children went to homeless shelters which cater for only women and children, and the men were taken elsewhere. So it seems as though we might see a repeat of that, where families are ripped apart and separated from each other. But we wait to see, and we'll find out once the information has been made public as to where they'll be staying, and if their pleas will be heeded or heard by the government of the day.
All right, we'll certainly keep track of that story. Mbalenhle, thank you so much for that. SABC News reporter Mbalenhle Mthethwa in studio with us on the latest details on the building fire that claimed 2 lives in Johannesburg this morning.